Hi everyone, Kyoka here. This is my first time doing long form content, so I apologize in advance if things look a little bit unprofessional. As you can see, I'm just doing it in the corner of my room, and with HVN coming to a close and DTR coming up soon, I wanted to give my impression on where Arcane Rise stands in the current metagame and my personal thoughts of the deck. If someone just wanted a quick answer to my thoughts on the deck, I would say Arcane Rye is a 7 out of 10 in the current metagame, and I'll explain a little bit more as to the reasons why later in the video. But first, I was a little bit shocked to find that Rye is only 1.5% share of the meta, which is stagnant from Mortal Ambition, which I thought was Rye's darkest times. Before then, back in Alchemical Revolution, Rye was 6% of the meta, and then we've went down to 4% in Mercurial Heart, and we've stayed at 1.5% ever since then. And there are a couple of reasons why that might be the case. But before I go into that, let's talk about the preceding meta in Mortal Ambition. Back in Mortal Ambition, there existed a card called Icebound Slam, which read as a 7 cost deal 8 damage and put 2 to 3 floating memory in the bin. Now, as a Rye player, if you got hit with this card, you were basically sent to the Shadow Realm. There was no way to come back from taking that much damage, your opponent gaining that much value that early in the game. Now, once this card got banned, I thought we would see an increase in Rye usage from alleviating deck building constrictions as well as some of the new tools that we saw in AMB and HVN. One of the primary new cards that sees play now in Rye builds is Shattering Discharge. Shattering Discharge is a great deck, is a great role compression card because not only is it cheaper than other shield poking answers like Sparklight, it is also an arcane card, an arcane mage spell most importantly, and this contributes to your arcane levels once you get to level 3 if you banish this from memory. But not only can this be banished from memory, when you play it out of hand, the card also goes directly into banishment, leading it to be a key staple in most Rye decks that want to play arcane. Next, we've got Tome of Sorcery, which I believe is a marginally better card than Tome of Knowledge. As a Rye, you're typically wanting to banish from memory every time as you level up to level 3 because you want to put arcane cards into that banishment. Well, as a result of doing that, your influence is low once you get to Rye Stormseer, and one of the best ways to get your influence back is through Tome of Sorcery. Not only does it replenish the card that you banish right away, but once you play Tome of Sacred Lightning, it absorbs the effects of the tome that you banish, and it copies the ability. So you get the on-ender draw again, and because it comes in untapped, you get to tap Tome of Sacred Lightning to banish the card that was just placed into memory, and you get to draw that into hand. A great way to recover your influence once you're at level 3 Rye. Lastly, Mnemonic Charms is a deceptively effective card in Rye builds. Now, you might think this might only play towards Advent of the Stormcaller, which it is really great for. In the past, you would have to run Power Overwhelming and sacrifice Enlightenment counters to reasonably cast Advent of the Stormcaller very quickly in the game. But with Charm, it opens up some new avenues. For example, once you go to level 3 Rye, you're typically around level 8, and once you banish a arcane card for a tome, you get to about level 10, and then with 2 charms and an arcane sight, or 2 arcane sights and a charm, you're right around that area where you can cast Advent of the Stormcaller for free. But in addition to Advent of the Stormcaller, it can also provide some surprise lethals. Typically, once you get to level 3 Rye, when you're around level 8 in total levels, it's very difficult to cast 2 Arcane Blasts and without the tome. But if you have the charm, you can supplement casting 1 Arcane Blast with a charm and then cast another Arcane Blast using your influence, and that typically can kill most champions. The charm also gives you access to early Purgeon Flames to alleviate pressure, and it can also play with Indolent Leisure, giving you some extra value in the early game. Now, with all these tools, how come Rai still sees such low usage in the current metagame? Well, I think a multitude of reasons play into that. One is its inconsistency. Now, when you think about a typical Rai build, about half the deck is unplayable until you're level 3. You have about 20 something arcane cards, you've got Fireball, you've got Careful Studies, none of which is very useful in bridging you up to level 3. And because of the deck constriction, you wouldn't be able to have as many answers available for all the different decks out there. You're essentially on a very linear game plan, and when that game plan falls apart, there's not really any other backup plan or another option that you can rely on to get you to Arcane. Now, in addition to its inconsistency, I also think Rai is a very brutal deck to learn. Brutal not in the sense that it has hard mechanics to learn, but more that Rai isn't as simple as it once was. Back in Fractured Crown, you only had to deal with Safeguard Amulet, Blanche. Some decks had some answers such as Veiling Breeze or Innervate Agility to survive. But nowadays you're dealing with a whole lot more. You've got Incapacitate, you've got Glimmering Refusal, you got Cerulean Decree, Tidal Lock. Lorraine decks are running Clarent. There's so much more to think about as a Rai player, and you can't just push for lethal willy-nilly. When you try to go for lethal and you fail, oftentimes you just get killed in return. And I think all of that combines for a frustrating experience in that if they even survive to get to the late game can be easily dealt with, and that can lead to a lot of frustrations. I've seen it with my own eyes with new players picking up the deck only to go into locals and get gaped in the ass going 0-3 and eventually giving up on the deck to find something more consistent. I mean, I don't blame them. Like, who wants to get gaped for the rest of their lives playing this? I guess I do, since I'm still playing Rai, but it takes a lot of patience now in thinking when you can press for lethal, when you can take the damage, and sometimes you even want to be casting damage spells even if you don't have lethal, just to bait out interaction and make the opponent think, well, if I take this damage, maybe he has a way of getting through and pushing lethal. So you put them on edge as well. And this type of back and forth and where things are not so clear can result in a lot of frustration for a new player. Next, what I think it makes Rai difficult is the power level of early game decks. When you think about the burst potential of Fractal Dao, and without having to jump through the hurdles of leveling up to level 3 and constricting your deck to 30 unplayable cards in the early game, it just seems like it's so much easier to play Fractal Dao and not having to deal with all the hassle Arcane Rai goes through. And when you think about the early ally pressure decks like Oath Allies being able to put through massive damage if they've got 3 unique allies on board, you've got Faiza who just hand dumps in a very linear early game plan, and they can push like 20 damage in a turn on the second turn of the game. When you compare the capabilities of these decks on level 1 and all the restrictions and inconsistencies Rye has to go through to get to their game plan, it's like, why would you even want to play Rye? So despite all that, why do I think Rye is still a 7 out of 10 deck? Two reasons. One, Rye's kill potential always has to be respected. There are times where the opponent does feel helpless against a Rye, where they banish very smoothly up until Stormseer, and then they might even instantly have kill the moment they level up if they high roll. I also think Rye has a decent matchup into most of the metagame out there. I mean, if we look at some of the popular decks out there, I think outside of Fractal Dow, which I think is about a 25-75 matchup, all the other matchups, there's play for Rye to win. Rye's either favored, 50-50, or just marginally worse. And if the only deck I'm worried about is Fractals, then I think Rye's in a pretty good standing. But I think it takes someone who knows how to pilot the deck through those different matchups, knowing the board state situation, and being able to spot creative lethal lines where it might otherwise not be visible for the average Rye player. Now, with DTR coming up, I only took a brief look at some of the new cards, and I don't think fundamentally the way Rye plays is going to change at all. I think the same problems are still going to plague Rye, but there are some interesting tools that I'll probably go over in a separate video. For example, I saw a card that was a no strings attached healing that replenishes the card that you spend. That's pretty good, even though it's 4 cost. There's also some new value engine ideas that has potential. So I look forward to going over some of the more impactful cards in another video. And once I have time to craft some decks using the DTR cards, I also look forward to bringing those ideas to you as well. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to my first video. Hopefully it wasn't too bad, and I look forward to speaking with you all again in the next one.